This episode of the Commercial Real Estate Investor Podcast is brought to you by my CRE Accelerator Mastermind, where you'll get access to my step-by-step investment blueprint, essentially a library of resources on how to invest in commercial real estate. You'll get connected to a supportive community of other commercial real estate investors that are doing projects just like you. You'll get personalized coaching and feedback from me every step of the way. Go to www.crecentral.com to learn more. Welcome back to the Commercial Real Estate Investor Podcast. We are live from the Cauble Group studios here in Nashville, Tennessee for another round of office hours. You have questions on commercial real estate, whether you're doing a project, whether you're trying to raise capital for the first time, whether you're a broker and you're looking to learn how to grow your business, doesn't matter. That is what this time is for. We'll dive into whatever questions you have around all of that. We go live every Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time to answer those questions. So feel free to join me pretty much anytime. Robert, what's going on, man? Just jumping in the chat saying good morning. Good morning. Good to see you. Robert has been a regular in all of our 30 deals in 30 days, which I'll be talking about here in a second. It's been a lot of fun. All right, before we dive into today's topic, which I want to talk about, which is partnerships. The title of this Reddit thread is "Me and a partner are buying an industrial property and he wants to bring in his wife." Talking about complicated partnerships. How are we supposed to handle that? We're going to dive into it. I'm going to give you my thoughts on how to work with commercial real estate partners. But this past week, we had our capital raising mastermind here in Nashville. 70 people came into town from all over the country. Some of them are from Nashville. Not as many as you would think, which is kind of funny. But we had the accelerator, we had the brokers mastermind together, and we had some guest speakers, we had some panels, we had some workshops, property tours. It was a great 3 days here in Nashville. We had a good time. It was our biggest in-person mastermind event yet. It was the first one that we actually opened up to non-member guests. So keep an eye out. We're going to do the same thing in March. We will open up probably 10 or 20 seats for non-members. If you want to come and get a taste of how we do things, right? Learn how to raise capital, or learn how to underwrite, or learn how to go out and find your first deal. We cover all sorts of different topics at these events. They're a lot of fun. So the past week, I guess technically today is day 7. We are in the midst of 30 deals in 30 days. If you're not familiar with that challenge, that is the underwriting challenge that I have put on, I guess kind of for myself, but also for you all, right? I'm going live every single day, 30 days in a row, underwriting your deals. So people that have joined the challenge are submitting deals, they're submitting cities or types of assets that they would like for me to underwrite, and we're going live and we're finding something on CREXE or LoopNet or whatever that's on the market, right? So these are not deals that I have looked at or found before. So you guys get to see in real time my thought process, wrapping my mind around a new market, around this type of asset, trying to find comps, all of that good stuff. So far, let's see what we have underwritten. We have underwritten flex space conversion. We've done mixed use value add. We did a 30-tenant strip center. That was out in California. Some people think California is too expensive. I don't necessarily think so. We did a value add flex space. We did stabilized self-storage. And then last night, we underwrote a fully abandoned building in downtown Tacoma. So it has been a wide variety of assets. The entire point of 30 deals in 30 days is to give you enough knowledge of how I go about the process so that you can go out and find your own deals and underwrite them, right? So let's see, catching you guys up on some of the projects that I've got going on right now. The Friars deal that we closed, y'all may be familiar with that. We did a video on it back in, I don't know, August, maybe July. We bought a 101,000 square foot flex building out in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And we brought about $1.2 million in CapEx for the budget to fix the space up. And we ended up getting all of our leases signed without any tenant improvements. So we have $1.2 million just sitting there. So that is one thing that we're discussing now is, hey, what do we do with this money? Do we return it back to our investors, or do we invest it somewhere else into the property? That's a great problem to have. Pretty excited about that. But hey, that shows you that there's a lot of demand for flex space when you're doing it right. Salt Ranch is pretty close. Oh, we are so on the 1 yard line. It's my boutique hotel here in East Nashville. It's right down the street. I'm headed over there to a construction meeting after this to see when we're going to be finally getting our certificate of occupancy. It should be close. We've passed most of our inspections. We just need the fire inspection done, and they were supposed to be out yesterday. So either we passed that, or we got some feedback on what else we should be doing. But we're this close. I can almost taste it, which is really cool. So it's fun. Hotels are just different, right? I mean, when you do a strip center, you kind of get it to a certain point and then you're done, right? The tenant's going to come in, they're going to do their own FF&E, they're going to do their own, details on the property. Whereas with a hotel, you have to do all of that yourself. So now we're looking up, okay, who can do Corten steel signs of our logo? Little things like that. We got to go shopping for all the books to go on the library bookshelves. We got to make the wine selections to go in the wine shop. All sorts of little micro decisions that have to be made that can be pretty exhausting, but it's all going to be worth it. I'm really, really excited with how that building is turning out. And then my storage facility out in Chattanooga, you guys know that I'm building a 350 unit self-storage facility out there. We were really, really close, and then the company that we hired to build our deck and our ramp, like the stairs and the ADA accessible ramp, they decided that they would interpret what ADA accessibility and 2 code meant on their own, which, sometimes it just happens. I was out there when they were building it, but it looked really good. The last part that they built, though, which I was not there for, was the ramp. If you're remotely familiar with how ADA accessibility works, you have basically 1 inch of rise over a 12-inch span, right? So that means for every foot that you go, it can only go up about 1 inch. So, these are steady inclines, right? I got out there to look at it, and it was so steep you couldn't walk up this ramp. And I looked at it, and it goes up 5 feet over an 11-foot run. So it's like a 45% grade. Like they basically don't make roads this steep. So we're having to have them completely tear that out and redo that. I'm having to buy some more materials, but I'm putting some of it on them because some of our materials would have been fine if they had built it the way that they were supposed to. And then the other thing too, they put the stringer wrong on the steps. You go up to the steps and you see it, and then there's just a lip at the top. Like the steps end, and then there's just a 1/2 inch lip. Like that's a major tripping hazard. How did you do that? So there's always something. There's always something. We're getting the doors installed here soon. All of the units are done. We're still waiting on EPB, which is a local power board, to finalize our electrical plans, and then we'll be open for business, baby. I'm really excited to be getting that self-storage facility going. It's going to be a good one because that's a deal where my partner and I, we both put $100,000 each into a piece of land here in North Nashville, rezoned it, and walked away with about $1.1 million after about 3 years, right? So about a 5x on our capital. Not a bad deal for not having to build anything. And, that's the nice thing about going out and doing deals where you are just entitling land and flipping it to the next guy, right? We didn't have to take on a substantial amount of debt or risk to make that happen. And then we just 1031 exchanged it into the self-storage facility. So it's going to cash flow like crazy. I'm really excited for that. Y'all know, or you may know, may not, I have not invested for cash flow for the last, 6-7 years that I've been doing this. Most of my deals have all been equity creation. So I don't personally invest for cash flow. I think that, a lot of people do that, right? They get very excited about it. But if you're trying to build a portfolio of commercial real estate, I think that's one of the slowest ways to do it, is to actually focus on the cash flow first instead of the amount of value that you can create. Think about it. If my partner and I had invested $200,000 for cash flow, and we, let's just say we were getting an 8% return on our money, right? I mean, we're talking about what, 16 grand a year? So $16,000, and after 3 years, we walked away with $1.1 million, so a $900,000 profit. So if I divide $900,000 by $16,000 a year, it would have taken me 56 years to make the same amount of money from cash flow as I did from creating value on the asset. 56 years. So that's why I have not invested for cash flow. By the time that you get to the point where cash flow matters, it's really because the asset, like you're done, right? You're tired. You don't want to do anything anymore, and you're fine with that money not making as much money anymore. So keep that in mind as you're going through, your strategy, your plans for building out your commercial real estate portfolio. Cash flow is important, but it's not the most important thing, especially if you know how to create some value. All right, let's look at this article today. Diving into partnerships. So this is me and a partner are buying an industrial property, and he wants to bring in his wife. He wants to bring in essentially a third party, but kind of somebody who has his partner's best interests in mind, right? So he's saying we're still under contract, and as the buyer, it is in both of our names. There is a clause in the contract saying we can assign the deal to any entity that we own. That's very common. I typically put it into, like, I have a holding company that has 0 assets that I'll put, these deals under contract in and or assigns. All right, that way, because, we'll create the LLC towards the end of the acquisition. And so there's no need to, start an LLC for a deal you don't know if you're closing on or not. The plan was to create an LLC where we are each a member. Here's where it's getting weird for me. My partner wants to create an LLC with he and his wife, and they would own 50%, and then I would own 50%, probably as a member as part of the umbrella LLC that we originally planned on. Am I overthinking this, or is he basically bringing in a third partner? He keeps telling me that I still have my 50%, but I'm not quite convinced. I told him I do not want it to be a tick, and that shouldn't be a problem. My concern is that now all aspects of owning the property have to involve a third partner to a degree. Also, they will have a separate operating agreement for their LLC, and it could make things confusing. His concern is he wants to make sure his wife gets something if he dies. I feel like we can come up with another solution for his concern in the operating agreement. Am I overthinking this? Right off the bat, I think there's a little overthinking going on here, because at the end of the day, they still have their vote, you still have your vote. It's still 50-50, which, first off, you should never do anything ever that is 50-50. At least give somebody 51 and the other person 49. I don't care if you're giving up that controlling right, as long as everybody's going into this knowing who is actually going to be making the decision at the end of the day. The worst thing that you could ever do, I had one deal that went incredibly sideways. Fortunately, I was still able to sell it and get all of our investor capital back, where I was naive. It was one of my earlier deals. I went in with a partner 50-50, and he decided that he wanted to do his own thing. And so I couldn't get anything approved, nothing, because I only had 50% of the vote. He had to also agree. And if he didn't agree, it didn't matter. Like, we had to get attorneys involved. It was a really, really big deal because he almost cost our investors a lot of money. It was really, really bad. And so fortunately, we were able to basically say, look, if you don't do this, you are taking on 100% of the liability of what's going to happen to our investors next. And here's what that's going to look like. And we will be suing you, and the investors will be suing you. And he ended up backing down and just agreeing and let us sell the property. But it was an absolute nightmare. So, moral of the story, don't ever do anything 50-50. I don't care if you have to give up the 1% control so that somebody else can ultimately make the decision. It's going to make your life substantially better. All right? So to me, I'm like, yeah, I don't care if there's 30 people involved on that side. They still only have half the vote. And that doesn't mean that you have to have a meeting with 30 people, or you don't even have to necessarily meet with him and his wife. They're going to have their own operating agreement, and they're going to have a managing member of that operating agreement. So theoretically, you could just say, I'm only going to deal with the wife, or I'm only going to deal with the husband. It doesn't matter. Pick a partner. However that ends up working out. However, I will say, like, the partner wanting to make sure that his wife gets something if he dies could be very easily solved through a trust or through a will. So that to me doesn't necessarily make any sense from that perspective. I mean, he may just be saying, I want it to be easier for my wife to step into my shoes and take over this, which is totally fair and fine, right? And I have partners that have their wives as partners in the LLCs in which they're investing in. It's really not uncommon. Let's see what some of these other comments are saying. Why can't you both buy two separate properties and own them? Each can do as they decide. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot easier said than done. I can't stand the whole rhetoric of like, oh, don't ever get a partner involved in anything because partners are terrible. I mean, you have to be very careful with it. Make sure you've got an attorney involved. Make sure that you are approaching this the right way. But at the end of the day, partnerships are a phenomenal way for you to grow and scale your commercial real estate business, especially if you don't have the cash, or especially if you're not great at raising capital, or you're not good at finding deals, but you are good at raising capital. Everybody has different skill sets. And if you watch Shark Tank, like most of the sharks, they don't want to invest in single member deals. They always want a couple of partners. That's like the private equity model. They want at least two, they want two co-founders because if something happens, there's somebody else there. This next comment is saying this is actually a pretty common concern in commercial real estate partnerships and you're not overthinking it. Here's my take. Your partner structure would effectively make his wife a third decision maker, even if you maintain 50% ownership. This could complicate operational decisions, distributions, and future sales. While his estate planning concerns are valid, there are cleaner ways to handle this, like transfer on death provisions in the operating agreement. Yeah, I mean, obviously legally it doesn't make her a third decision maker, unless it's just not, because in the operating agreement, their LLC will have a vote and you will have a vote, right? However, it does obviously inject her opinion into this. Whether she's involved or not, she could start, complicating things. You can clean all of this up with an operating agreement. Like it's very easy. Just go to your attorney and tell them, that you want to make sure that this isn't going to become a problem. And it's going to be relatively easy to solve all of this, right? You could have timelines on how decisions, on when decisions can be made. You can have guidelines as to how decisions will be made. So, that could all be handled that way. That's what an operating agreement is for. They're also saying having two separate LLCs with different operating agreements adds unnecessary complexity and potential conflicts. For example, what happens if their LLC has internal disputes? How does that affect property management decisions? Keep it simple, one LLC, one operating agreement, clear terms. I completely disagree with that. I don't think that having multiple LLCs complicates anything. Again, that's their LLC. They have to deal with it. That has nothing to do with the LLC that owns this entity. If they have internal disputes, that's between them. We have investors that invest in our deals in LLCs because they're raising capital from 10, 20, 30 friends. They all invest together in this LLC, and then that LLC invests with me. So there's never problems there because they're all professionals. It's all been handled in the operating agreement as to how everything will be managed. So to me, it seems like you might have some amateurs here that are jumping in and trying to give some of this legal advice. Now, one thing I will say, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not going to give you legal advice, and none of this is legal advice. Talk to your attorneys about this. But I'm just sharing, from my experience, that's generally not how it happens. Yeah, here's another one. Having a partnership is the best way to get screwed. Friends become enemies. If you are in a community property state, his wife owns her share too. If they divorce, she could fight him and the court could give her as your new partner. These people have no clue how operating agreements work. I mean, we actually specifically have a clause in our operating agreements that if the transfer upon death, fine, but they have to get bought out, or they no longer have a vote in the day-to-day, depending on which deal it is. Because nobody wants to be partners with somebody else's spouse. You can just handle that with an operating agreement. It's really, really not that complicated. People are funny. All right, so there is my take on this week's Reddit thread. Let's see what Evan's saying. I'm planning on building new flex in the spring next year and looking to buy some of the neighbor's lots so I can expand in the future. Any suggestions on how or what I should say for them to sell? I mean, Evan, I'm a pretty simple man. I would just say, hey, you want to sell your lot? I'm a buyer. You know, I mean, I texted a buddy yesterday. We had talked about one of his deals like 2 years ago. And I just said, hey, man, because we were going to build something there. He was going to build something there. We were going to lease it. He never ended up doing anything with it. I was like, hey, would you be interested in selling us? He's like, yeah, maybe, yeah. So I said, what do you want? He goes, I don't know. Okay, cool. Well, I'll crunch some numbers and I'll get back to you. I'm pretty simple when it comes to that. I don't think that there's some sort of magical phrase that you're going to be able to say to convince somebody to sell. So I would just be straightforward and say, hey, look, we'd like to buy your lot. What are you interested in selling it for? Antonia saying, Tyler, good morning. Bit of an odd question, but I'm curious to know what type of content that investors like yourself would appreciate seeing from a broker. Not an odd question at all. I like seeing comps in the market. I like seeing the deals that you've recently closed, the deal terms that are coming out of it, right? Because, think about it. If I'm underwriting a deal, I want to know that the deal down the street was giving $20 a foot in TI. And then a deal was actually inked at $25 a foot triple net with, delivery and as is condition, but the landlord gave $20 a foot in TI, right? Little things like that. Or maybe that, hey, market terms right now are 30 days free rent, right? Something like that. I mean, think about it from your perspective of like only something that a broker is going to know that commercial real estate investors are going to value when they're going through the underwriting process. And Tony, I know you've been very involved in our 30 deals, 30 days. There's a lot of information that we're covering in there where I'm saying like, I would have to call a broker for this. So how do you get in front of all of these property owners and let them know you've got that information, right? That is when a broker can become unbelievably valuable, is when they are actively calling property owners and not pitching anything, but just saying, hey, John, this is Tyler Cauble. I just did a deal down the street from your building at 123 Main Street. I just wanted to let you know, some of the deal terms that we had on there, just in case it's going to impact anything that you're doing at your property. You have 5 minutes to talk. Come on, as a property owner, you're going to sit there. You're not going to say, no, I have no time for you, right? Like that could be a very good conversation for that investor to have. And you're proving to them that you're active in the market. You're proving to them that you are closing deals. You're proving to them that you know what's going on in the area, and you might be the go-to for them whenever they have a vacancy or they decide to sell or whatever. So you don't even have to pitch. You're just showing them that you're the expert. And eventually over time, they're going to know that you're the person to call, right? So I think that's a great way to approach it. Z is saying, good morning. Good morning, Z. Good to see you. Also very active in 30 deals, 30 days. We've got a lot of regulars on the show now. It's really cool to see. We've got day 7 today. I don't know what we're going to be diving into later this afternoon, but I think we're going live at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time? No, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time for day 7. If you want the actual schedule of when we're going live and underwriting deals so that you can jump in and watch every deal from the beginning, or if you want to submit deals, feel free to join the challenge. It's crecentral.com/30 deals, 30 days. That link is in all the descriptions of all the videos as well. Z is saying, what would you recommend, 506B or 506C as a new syndicator in the neighborhood? Z, that's a great question. We actually talked about that quite a bit this past weekend. I have my securities attorney come out and talk to everybody about 506B versus 506C. I am not a fan of 506Cs for newer investors because, your investors have to be accredited in order for you to do a 506C. And you're able to market it, which is great. But if nobody knows who you are, if you don't have a track record, if you aren't BlackRock, that marketing it's not going to matter. It's really not. What I have found in the past when I did a 506C on Friars Flax and we did a 506C, several years ago. So those are the only two. Everything else I have done has been 506B. What I found on that first 506C, I thought, we've got this YouTube channel, we've got the podcast, I've got a pretty decent following on Instagram. We'll go market it to everybody. What I found was that I got like 2 new accredited investors. All I did was cut out all of my regular investors that were not accredited. They couldn't invest in that deal. I was like, man, that's kind of a bummer. So I ended up, that's why we do mostly 506Bs. It's friends and family. As long as I can prove that I've got a pre-existing relationship with you, then you are able to come in on our deals. So, I mean, even with, like I get a lot of investors through YouTube. I get a lot of investors through Instagram. As long as, like, I don't have to have had a personal relationship with them for 10 years. As long as, they reach out, we have a call, we stay in touch, we discuss commercial real estate, maybe we get together in person for coffee, whatever, that's enough for them to be able to invest, So that's what I would say is go with the 506Bs. You've got plenty of friends that are willing to take a chance on you and maybe throw in 10, 15, 25 grand in a deal. Finding accredited investors it can be tougher. C-Bear is saying, I'm wondering if you have ever done a lease type with a small business where you don't take any rent for X amount of years, but instead get X% of their monthly cash flow and then average it for rent. So C-Bear, what you're talking about is called percentage rent. And it's not uncommon in commercial real estate. When you get into like downtown areas or really high-end retail districts or something like that, I avoid it like the plague because it's just not worth it. I have the rent that I would like to get, and then that's it. You run your business. The problem is if I start doing percent rent, now I have to get involved in your business. I have to see your monthly P&Ls, and I may even have to audit them to make sure that you're not hiding money from me. And so it's just not really worth it. And also, like, it kind of penalizes a business, in my opinion, for doing well. Like, if a business does well, I want them to just stay there and keep paying me rent every month. Whereas some businesses will start to look at that and they'll go, I am paying an absurd amount in percent rent to this landlord just for the privilege of staying here. I'm moving as soon as this is done. So, I'm not a huge fan. You'll see it typically in like retail or F&B, but definitely not, flex space. It just wouldn't make any sense. So awesome. Guys, well, that is it for this week's Office Hours. I will be live next Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time for the next round of Office Hours. But until then, catch me every day. 30 deals, 30 days, live underwriting random deals I've never seen before so that you can learn how to do it too. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you in the next one. This episode of the Commercial Real Estate Investor Podcast is brought to you by my CRE Accelerator Mastermind, where you'll get access to my step-by-step investment blueprint, essentially a library of resources on how to invest in commercial real estate. You'll get connected to a supportive community of other commercial real estate investors that are doing projects just like you. You'll get personalized coaching and feedback from me every step of the way. Go to www.crecentral.com to learn more.